Ever slip on a pair of shoes and think, wow, my feet are time travelers?
Okay, maybe not, but get this. The oldest shoes ever found, and we're talking really, really old, are over 10,000 years old.
10,000 years. That's incredible. What kind of shoes were they?
These weren't your average flip-flops either. We're talking woven sandals, crafted from sagebrush bark. They found them in a cave in Oregon.
Oregon cave sandals. Wow. Those Fort Rock sandals, as they call them, really make you think about, our ancestors were crafting durable footwear back then. Like they figured
Mhm.
out how to protect their feet while navigating some pretty rough terrain way back then.
I know, right? 10,000 years is just a blip in human history, though. So
Yeah.
what were our feet up to before those sandals came along?
Well, for most of human history, barefoot was the only way to go. And over millions of years, our feet evolved to be incredibly strong, flexible,
Yeah.
adaptable. So, like, super feet.
Exactly. Think about it. They were our original interface with the world,
Hmm.
providing support, constant sensory feedback.
Okay, so we're talking about a level of natural foot fitness that would make a yoga instructor jealous.
Exactly. And it's still alive and well in certain cultures. You've got the Tarahumara people of Mexico, for example. They're famous for running ultramarathons.
Barefoot.
Well, they wear these minimal sandals called huaraches. They're amazing.
Hmm.
Really showcases what the human foot can do when it's allowed to move naturally, without being confined.
Huaraches. I've seen pictures. They're like the original minimalist shoe. Weren't there other cultures who embraced this whole minimalist footwear idea too?
Absolutely. The ancient Egyptians, they had their sandals made from papyrus and palm leaves, perfect for those scorching deserts.
Makes sense.
Native American tribes, they developed moccasins, often made from soft deerskin, which allowed for, natural foot movement and protection. And we can't forget the Japanese waraji sandals, woven from straw. Everyone wore those, from like travelers to samurai.
So, minimalist footwear was the go-to for centuries. So, when did things change? When did shoes become less about function and more about, well, everything else? Status, fashion.
That's where things get really fascinating. As societies evolved, shoes became a way to express social status, cultural beliefs, and yes, even fashion trends.
Oh no, you're telling me our ancestors were dealing with fashion victims too.
Oh, yeah.
What was the ancient equivalent of a must-have shoe?
Well, things took a turn for the extravagant in the Middle Ages. Imagine shoes with toes so long they were utterly impractical.
Wait, are you talking about those ridiculously long, pointy shoes you see in old paintings? I always thought that was artistic license. People actually wore those things.
Oh, they were very real and a bit absurd, if you ask me. Those were the poulains of 14th century Europe. The longer the toe, the wealthier and more important you were. Imagine trying to walk, let alone get any work done, in those. It got so out of hand that governments actually started regulating toe length.
Seriously, they had fashion police back then.
In a way, yes. These sumptuary laws were meant to curb excessive spending on clothing. For example, in 1463, England's King Edward V limited toe length to 2 inches because these super long shoes were seen as, over the top, even dangerous in public.
Talk about a fashion crackdown, but it just goes to show we've always been obsessed with shoes, haven't we? So when did shoes, as we know them today, really start to emerge?
The Industrial Revolution was a major turning point. The invention of the sewing machine and other technologies, it paved the way for mass production, making shoes more affordable, more accessible.
So no more hand-stitched sandals passed down through generations.
Not as much. It was a trade-off. We had more shoes available, but mass production led to standardization.
Yeah.
And that's where we start to see a disconnect between shoe design and, the natural shape and movement of the human foot.
Instead of shoes conforming to our feet were expected to conform to the shoes.
Yeah, pretty much.
I can see where this is going.
It's the beginning of what some might call the modern shoe dilemma. We prioritized efficiency and cost over everything else. They started relying on standardized lasts. Those are the foot-shaped molds they use to make shoes. And they didn't really account for, the diversity of human feet.
Okay, so we're cramming our feet into shoes that weren't really made for them. Not ideal. So when did this whole idea that our feet need tons of support and cushioning come in?
It kind of emerged around the same time. And it made sense in some ways as cities grew and paved roads, replaced natural terrains. People weren't walking on soft, yielding surfaces anymore.
Right, from dirt paths to concrete jungles, not exactly forgiving on the feet.
This is when shoemakers began experimenting with new materials, like rubber, for example. They started adding arch supports, cushioned insoles, and even elevated heels.
Hold on, elevated heels. I thought those were a modern invention.
Not entirely. While high heels, as a fashion statement for women, Yeah, that came later. The idea itself has been around for a long time. Persian soldiers, for example, they wore shoes with heels to help them stay secure in stirrups.
Interesting. So, are you suggesting these early attempts at making shoes more comfortable might have inadvertently led us down the wrong path?
That's a question researchers are still exploring. There's a growing body of research suggesting that by over-supporting and over-cushioning our feet, we may actually be weakening them.
That's kind of counterintuitive, isn't it? We think we're giving our feet the royal treatment, but we might actually be doing more harm than good.
And I gotta say, the idea that our comfy, supportive shoes, the ones we wear every day, might actually be doing our feet a disservice, it's kind of mind-blowing.
It's a classic case of too much of a good thing, you
Yeah,
know?
right.
Our feet, just like any other part of our body, they're meant to move, adapt, be challenged.
So all that cushioning and support, we're basically like putting our foot muscles on permanent vacation.
Essentially, yeah. And when those muscles become weak and inactive, well, it can have this domino effect on, the entire body.
Right, because we don't often think about it, but
Yeah. Our feet are connected to everything else.
they are.
So even those seemingly harmless, small heels, they're in a lot of shoes these days, even if they're not stilettos. Like, could they be throwing off our alignment and causing issues way beyond just foot pain?
Exactly. Let's talk biomechanics for a moment. Just, that's the study of how our bodies move. Even a small heel lift, it changes how we distribute our weight, the mechanics of our steps. This can create imbalances in our muscles, our joints, potentially contributing to, like, back pain, hip problems, you name it.
Wow, I never realized my quest for a little extra height could have such a ripple effect. So it's not just about our muscles getting lazy. There's like a deeper mechanical issue at play here, too.
Precisely. Yeah. And on top of that, you've got the sensory aspect. Our feet, they're incredibly sensitive, thousands of nerve endings, providing, crucial information about the surface we're on, the texture, the incline, the stability. It's like having a built-in feedback system.
It's like our feet are constantly sending messages to our brains, helping us, navigate the world without us even realizing it.
Right, but when we encase our feet in these, like, thick cushioned soles, we're essentially, dulling those senses. It's been compared to wearing, like, noise-canceling headphones all the time. You might be blocking out distractions, but you're also missing out on important cues from your surroundings.
We lose that direct feedback loop with the ground, which then impacts like our balance, coordination, even our spatial awareness. So when did this whole barefoot movement start to gain traction? Was there like a particular moment when people really started questioning their comfy shoes?
The book Born to Run by Christopher McDougall, published in 2009.
Okay.
That really brought this conversation to the mainstream. McDougall, he investigated those incredible running abilities of the Tarahumara people. Remember them?
Right, those ultra marathon runners who make Horrocks look like high-tech gear.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he argued that, conventional running shoes, with all their cushioning and support, might actually be contributing to running injuries rather than preventing them.
So it wasn't just like a fringe idea. There was actual research starting to emerge that, supported this whole barefoot concept.
Absolutely. Researchers started studying the biomechanics of barefoot running compared to running in cushioned shoes. And they found that barefoot runners, they tend to land on their forefoot or midfoot.
Okay.
This allows the foot's natural arches to act as, like, shock absorbers.
It's like our feet have this built-in suspension system that we've been ignoring.
Precisely. But cushioned shoes, they often encourage a heel strike,
Yeah.
which sends a jarring force, up through the legs, and that can lead to more stress on your joints over time.
That makes a lot of sense. But I have to admit, the thought of just ditching my shoes and running barefoot, especially on pavement, like, my feet are cringing just thinking about it.
And that's completely understandable. The barefoot movement, it isn't about everyone going completely shoeless.
Okay.
It's about finding a balance,
Okay.
listening to what works for your body.
So it's not an all or nothing approach. You don't have to choose between your comfy shoes and like going full Tarahumara.
Not at all. In fact, most experts would recommend a gradual transition to avoid injuries. After all, our feet have become accustomed to this, certain level of support. If you suddenly go completely barefoot or switch to minimalist shoes without proper preparation, that can actually increase your risk of injuries.
That makes sense. You've got to give those foot muscles time to adapt, regain their like natural strength and all that. So
Yeah.
what does a more, I guess, gradual approach to minimalist footwear look like? Where do you even begin?
It starts with awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Pay attention to how your feet feel in your current shoes. Do your toes have room to move? Can you feel the ground beneath you? Those are important things to think about.
Okay, so step one, mindfulness check. What else?
Gradually introduce the, periods of barefoot walking or standing into your day.
Yeah.
Start with a few minutes around the house, gradually increase the time, try different surfaces, see how it feels.
So, like, maybe swapping out my slippers for some quality time with the living room carpet, I can get on board with that. What about those minimalist shoes I keep hearing about? Are they really worth the hype?
They can be a great option, but it's important to choose wisely.
Okay.
Minimalist shoes, they aim to allow for, more natural range of motion. They want to give you better ground feel. But there's a huge variety out there, different styles, different levels of minimalism.
Right, because those, like, toe shoes I've seen, the ones that look like gloves for your feet, those don't exactly scream beginner friendly.
You're talking about Vibram Five Fingers.
Yeah, yeah,
Some people love them, others not so much.
yeah.
It really depends on your comfort level, what you're looking for. There are plenty of other options that offer a more gradual transition.
Okay, so less toe shoe chic and more, like, real shoe minimalist vibes.
Exactly. There's brands like Zero Shoes. They draw inspiration from traditional minimalist footwear, like those Tarahumara Horrocks we talked
Yeah.
about. But they offer a more, conventional looking shoes, just with minimal soles, a wider toe box, that kind of thing.
So there's hope for us fashion-conscious folks who still want to give our feet a little more freedom. But how do you choose the right minimalist shoe for you? It seems kind of overwhelming.
It's about finding what works best for your feet, your lifestyle. Look for shoes with a wide toe box that allows your toes to spread naturally.
No more cramming my toes into those pointy-toed prisons.
Exactly. The shoe should move with your foot, not against it. So look for a flexible sole that allows your foot to, bend, articulate naturally.
Got it. A shoe that cooperates. Anything else?
And of course, make sure the shoes are comfortable. You don't want to be distracted by blisters or rubbing, that kind of thing. Comfort should be a top priority.
Comfort over everything. It seems like this whole barefoot thing is about so much more than just the shoes themselves. It's about, like, rediscovering how our feet are designed to move, challenging those assumptions we've just come to accept about footwear.
You're absolutely right. It's about reconnecting with our bodies, exploring a different way of, moving through the world.
It's about giving our feet permission to be feet. But what about those of us who, despite our best intentions, still kind of like a little heel or, some extra cushioning? Is there room for, like, compromise in this brave new world of minimalist footwear? So are we doomed to, like, ditch our favorite shoes entirely in pursuit of, happier feet? It feels like a big commitment.
Not at all. This isn't about, adopting some extreme minimalist dogma. It's about empowering yourself to make, informed choices about what you put on your feet.
So it's more about, like, incorporating those barefoot principles into our, our modern lives in a way that feels doable, like a barefoot-inspired approach.
Exactly. You might discover that minimalist shoes are great for certain activities, like, say, yoga or hiking,
Right.
while you still prefer some cushioning for, your daily commute.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Or maybe you start with those short periods of barefoot walking at home, like we talked about, and then you gradually incorporate, more minimalist footwear options into your routine.
It all comes back to, like, that awareness we talked about, right?
Yeah.
Tuning in to your body, finding that sweet spot between comfort, support, and, allowing your feet to move naturally. It really is amazing how something as, like, seemingly mundane as shoes can spark such a, like, shift in perspective, not just about our feet, but about how we move through the world.
It really is. And the best part is exploring what works for your feet doesn't require, fancy equipment or expensive gym memberships or anything like that.
It's as simple as taking off your shoes and paying attention to what your feet are telling you.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And, if you're hungry for more information on this whole barefoot journey, there are some great resources out there. One website that was mentioned in some of the stuff we've looked at is baretread.com. They've got tons of information, reviews, even like a supportive community to connect with.
It's like a one-stop shop for all things barefoot, from those, like, first tentative steps out of your shoes to, diving headfirst into the world of minimalist footwear. Well, on that note, I think it's time for us to kick off our shoes, figuratively speaking, of course, and wrap up this deep dive. It's been great having you.
Always a pleasure. And yeah, my toes could certainly use a little breathing room after all that talk about shoes.
I hear that. As always, it's been a pleasure exploring this fascinating topic with you. And to our listeners, we hope this episode has inspired you to, reconnect with your feet, challenge those assumptions about footwear, and maybe even try a little barefoot time. You might be surprised at what you discover. Until next time, we'll catch you on the flip side.